The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Naftali Bennett, Prime Minister, Minister for Community Affairs and Minister for National Digital Affairs of the State of Israel. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Naftali Bennett, Prime Minister, Minister for Community Affairs and Minister for National Digital Affairs of the State of Israel. I invite him to address the General Assembly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished delegates, Israel is a lighthouse in a stormy sea, a beacon of democracy, diverse by design, innovative by nature, and eager to contribute to the world despite being in the toughest neighborhood on earth. We are an ancient nation, returned to our ancient homeland, revived our ancient language, restored our ancient sovereignty. Israel is a miracle of Jewish revival. Am Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel is alive, and the state of Israel is its beating heart. My friends, for way too long, Israel was defined by wars with our neighbors. But this is not what Israel is about. This is not what the people of Israel are about. You see, Israelis don't wake up in the morning thinking about conflict. Israelis, like everyone else, want to lead a good life. We want to take care of our families and build a better world for our children. And that means that from time to time, we might need to leave our jobs, say goodbye to our families, and rush to the battlefield to defend our country. Just like my friends and I have had to do ourselves from time to time. They should not be judged for it. Israelis remember the dark horrors of our past, but remain determined to look ahead, to build a brighter future. Distinguished delegates, there are two plagues that are challenging the very fabric of our society at this moment. One, of course, is the coronavirus, which has killed over 5 million people around the globe. The other has also shaken the world as we know it, and it's the disease of political polarization. Both coronavirus and polarization can erode public trust in our institutions. Both can paralyze nations. If left unchecked, their effects on society can be devastating. In Israel, we faced both. And rather than accept them as a force of nature, we stood up, we took action, and now we can already see the horizon. In a polarized world where algorithms fuel our anger, people on the right and on the left operate in two separate realities, two separate spheres, each in their own social media bubble. They hear only the voices that confirm what they already believe in. And then people end up hating each other. Societies get torn apart because they're not hearing each other. Now, countries that are broken from within can get nowhere. In Israel, after 4 elections in 2 years, with the 5th looming, the people yearned for an antidote, calm, stability, an honest attempt for political normalcy. You see, inertia is always the easiest choice. But there are moments in time where leaders have to take the wheel a moment before hitting the cliff, face the heat, but then drive the country to safety. And that's exactly what we did. About 100 days ago, my partners and I formed a new government in Israel, the most diverse government in Israel's history. What started as a political accident can now turn into a purpose, and that purpose is unity. You know, today we sit together around one table. We speak to each other with respect. We act with decency, and we carry a message. Things can be different. Even though we harbor very, very different political opinions, we're sitting together for the good of our nation. It's okay to disagree. It's okay, in fact, I'd say vital, that different people think differently. It's even okay to argue. You know, healthy debate is a basic tenet of the Jewish tradition. I can tell you that it's also one of the secrets to the success of the startup nation. Just enter one of the companies and you'll see that debate going on. Debate is the power of innovation. But what we've now proven in Israel is that even in the age of social media, we can debate without hate. The second great disease we're all facing is the coronavirus, sweeping the world. To overcome it, we're going to need to make new discoveries. We're going to need to gain new insights, achieve new breakthroughs. It all begins with the pursuit of knowledge. And the state of Israel is on the front lines of the search for this vital knowledge. We developed in Israel a model which fuses the wisdom of science with the power of policymaking. The Israeli model has three guiding principles. One, the country must stay open. We all paid a huge price, an economic price, a physical price, an emotional price. Just ask your kids for bringing life to a standstill in 2020. But my friends, to bring economies back to growth, children back to schools, and parents back to work, well, lockdowns, restrictions, quarantines aren't the way. You can't do it in the long term. Our model, rather than locking people down in passive sleep mode, the model recruits them to the effort. They can be part of the effort. I'll give you an example. We asked Israeli families to carry out home testing of their children, all the children. Did this a few weeks ago so we can keep schools open, and indeed, schools stayed open. Now I can tell you that we're going to distribute dozens of these self-tests to all Israeli parents. They can be part of the fight. The second rule, vaccinate early. Right from the start, Israelis were quick to vaccinate. See, we're in a race against a deadly virus, and we have to stay ahead of it. In July, we were the first to learn, to realize that the vaccines were waning, getting weaker. And that's what brought a surge in Delta cases in Israel. It was then when my government decided to administer a third dose of vaccine, the booster, to the Israeli public. It was a tough decision, given that at the time the FDA hadn't yet even approved it. But we faced a choice to either drag Israel into yet another set of lockdowns, further harm our economy and society, or double down on vaccines. We chose the latter. Israel pioneered the booster shot. Now, 2 months in, I can report that it works. With a third dose, you're 7 times more protected than with 2 doses 8 months in, and 40 times more protected than without any vaccine. The booster works. As a result, Israel is on course to escape the 4th wave without a lockdown, without further harm to our economy. Israel's economy is growing. Unemployment is going down. I'm glad our actions have inspired other countries to follow with the booster. The third rule, adapt and move quickly. So we formed a national task force that meets every day. I lead it. This task force is intended to bypass slow governmental bureaucracy, make quick decisions, and act on them right away. Trial and error is key. Every day is a new day, with new data and new decisions. When something works, we keep it. When something doesn't, we ditch it and move on. My friends, running a country during a pandemic is not only about health. It's about carefully balancing all aspects of life that are affected by Corona, especially jobs and education. While doctors are an important input, they cannot be the ones running the national initiative. The only person that has a good vantage point of all considerations is the national leader of any given country. Above all, we're doing everything right now in our power to provide our people with tools needed to protect their lives. The ancient Jewish texts, the Talmud, says, whoever saves one life is as if he saved an entire world. And that's what we aspire to do. Distinguished delegates, while Israel strives to do good, we cannot lose sight for one moment of what's happening in our neighborhood. Israel is quite literally surrounded by Hezbollah, Shia militias, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas on our borders. These terror groups seek to dominate the Middle East and spread radical Islam across the world. What do they all have in common? They all want to destroy my country, and they're all backed by Iran. They get their funding from Iran. They get their training from Iran. They get their weapons from Iran. Iran's great goal is crystal clear to anybody who cares to open their eyes. Iran seeks to dominate the region and seeks to do so under a nuclear umbrella. For the past 3 decades, Iran spread its carnage and destruction around the Middle East, country after country. Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Gaza. What do all these places have in common? Well, they're all falling apart. Their citizens hungry and suffering. Their economies collapsing. Like the Midas touch, Iran's regime has the mullah touch. Every place Iran touches fails. And if you think Iranian terror is confined to Israel, you're wrong. let me tell you some news. Just this year, Iran made operational a new deadly terror unit, a startup, swarms of killer UAVs armed with lethal weapons that can attack any place at any time. They plan to blanket the skies of the Middle East with this lethal force. Iran has already used these deadly UAVs, called Shahed 136, to attack Saudi Arabia, American targets in Iraq, civilian ships at sea, most recently killing a Brit and a Romanian. Iran plans to arm its proxies in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon with hundreds, and later on thousands, of these deadly UAVs. So you can ignore it, but experience tells us that what starts in the Middle East doesn't stop there. Distinguished delegates, in 1988, Iran set up a death commission that ordered the mass murder of 5,000 political activists. They were hanged from cranes. The death commission was made up of 4 people. Ibrahim Raisi, Iran's new president, was one of them. Raisi also oversaw the murder of Iranian children. His nickname is the Butcher of Tehran because that's exactly what he did. He butchered his own people. One of the witnesses of this massacre stated in her testimony that when Raisi would finish a round of murder, he'd throw a party, pocketing the money of those he just executed minutes ago, and then he would sit down to eat cream cakes. He celebrated the murder of his own people by devouring cream cakes. And now this very Raisi is Iran's new president. This is who we're dealing with. Over the past few years, Iran has made a major leap forward in its nuclear R&D, its production capacity, its enrichment. Iran's nuclear weapon program is at a critical point. All red lines have been crossed, inspections ignored, all wishful thinking proven false. Iran is currently violating the IAEA's safeguard agreements, and it's getting away with it. They harass inspectors and sabotage their investigations, and they're getting away with it. They enrich uranium to the level of 60%, which is only one step short of weapons-grade material, and they're getting away with it. Evidence which clearly proves Iran's intentions for nuclear weapons in secret sites in Turkuzabad, Tehran, and Marivan is ignored. Iran's nuclear program has hit a watershed moment, and so has our tolerance. Words do not stop centrifuges from spinning. There are those in the world who seem to view Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons as an inevitable reality, as a done deal, or they've just become tired of hearing about it. Israel doesn't have that privilege. We cannot tire. We will not tire. Israel will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. And I want to tell you something. Iran is much weaker much more vulnerable than it seems. Its economy is sinking. Its regime is rotten, divorced from the younger generation in Iran. Its corrupt government fails to even bring water to large parts of the country. The weaker they are, the more extreme they go to hide their weakness. And I'm telling everyone, if we put our heads to it, if we're serious about stopping it, if we use our resourcefulness, we can prevail. And that's exactly what we're going to do. My friends, not everything is dark in the Middle East. Alongside worrying trends, there are also rays of light. First and foremost, the growing ties Israel is forging with Arab and Muslim countries. Ties that began 42 years ago with Israel's historic peace with Egypt, continued 27 years ago with our peace agreement with Jordan, and even more recently with the Abraham Accords that normalized our relations with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. More is to come. At a ripe young age of 73, more and more nations are coming to understand Israel's value and unique place in the world. Well, some friends have stood with us since our founding. The United States of America is a long-time trusted friend and ally of Israel, as we saw yet again just a few days ago in Congress. Alongside our old friends, we're gaining new friends in the Middle East and beyond. Last week, this manifested itself with the defeat of the racist, anti-Semitic Durban Conference. This conference was originally meant to be against racism, but over the years turned into a conference of racism against Israel and the Jewish people. The world's had enough of this. I want to thank the 38 countries, 38, who chose truth over lies and skipped the conference. And to those countries who chose to participate in this farce, well, I can only say, attacking Israel doesn't make you morally superior. Fighting the only democracy in the Middle East doesn't make you woke. Adopting cliches about Israel without even bothering to learn the basic facts, well, that's just plain lazy. My friends, every member state in this building has a choice. It's not a political choice, it's a moral one. It's a choice between darkness and light. Darkness that persecutes political prisoners, murders the innocent, abuses women and minorities, and seeks to end the modern world as we know it. Or light that pursues freedom, prosperity, opportunity. Over the past 73 years, the state of Israel, the people of Israel, have achieved so much in the face of so much. And yet, I can say with full confidence, our best days are ahead of us. Israel is a nation of great hope, a nation that's brought the heritage of the Torah to life in modern-day Israel, a nation of an unbreakable spirit. Me'at min ha'or doche harbe min ha'choshech. A bit of light dispels much darkness. The lighthouse among the stormy seas stands tall, stands strong, and her light shines brighter than ever. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister, Minister for Community Affairs, and Minister for National Judicial Affairs of the State of Israel for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.